How bad have things gotten for Gang Green at One Jets Drive and MetLife Stadium? Bad enough that we're starting to see the R word getting thrown around a whole lot. Rebuild. Are the Jets in a full rebuild, or are they just a team that's underperforming? I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. So coming into this year, folks, expectations were low. The fan base largely seemed sort of morose and kind of excited to see if guys develop, and we're happy with what Aaron Glenn is saying. There were a few things to kind of hang on to, but in all reality, nobody in their right mind was expecting big things from this team. But one thing, I mean, nobody expected it to be this bad. Nobody expected 0-5 worst defense in the NFL. Even me. I said this team was going to be bad. I did not expect. I said they had a chance at a top 5 pick, top 3 pick. Didn't expect this. And I could be wrong, but I don't remember. And I'm on the Twitter a lot. I'm on the forums at Jet Nation. You should be too, most active on the web. I don't remember a lot of people on any platforms, any apps, saying that this was a rebuild year or a rebuild full stop. To me, and we're seeing it now. I'm seeing a lot of folks on Twitter. This is a rebuild. Of course it's a rebuild. We knew this was a rebuild. I guess, to be fair, this just comes down to how you define a rebuild. I mean, there's no hard, fast, like textbook, this is exactly what a rebuild is, and this team does or does not fit that criteria. Because I've spoken to fans who I think a lot of, and I know they're very knowledgeable, a couple of folks this week that I've spoken to, and they're like, yeah, dude, this is a rebuild. Like, they have to rebuild this thing. The way I look at it, and I feel like with what the Jets have been through with their past few general managers, I feel like we should have a better idea of what a rebuild looks like. Because to me, the roster that just go back one GM, the roster Joe Douglas inherited, and remember, Douglas didn't have a draft. He didn't have a free agency. They let McCagnon do all that, and then Douglas came in. They're like, here's your roster. Your picks are in. Your contracts are signed. Your roster's full. You got no cap. And also, you don't have a center. So he went out and signed Ryan Khalil, and that was a complete disaster. But that, to me, was a team that was in rebuild mode. Like a general manager, Joe Douglas or whoever they hired, had to look at that thing and go, oh boy, like we need 8, 9, 10, 11 new starters. I mean, what's the number here? Right? How do we define rebuild? I don't think there's, again, like I said, there's not a rule, but I mean, if half of your starters are guys who aren't good and won't be around very long, I'd call that a rebuild. Half your guys or more. Now, if it's 3 or 4 guys or 5 guys, that's kind of what most teams go through every year. Like, hey, we have some holes and weaknesses and we got to fix them. Now, when quarterback is one of those holes, it's bigger, obviously. That's the biggest one. If you're hurting there, then you're behind the 8 ball. But so I went back and I'm looking at what the previous general manager inherited, and I'm looking at what the current general manager inherited. And these men are not operating in the same universe. And we can talk about Sam Darnold, right? Joe Douglas traded Sam Darnold. I get it. And I'm one of those people, can't really come down on me because I didn't feel very strongly either way. Do we trade Sam? Do we keep Sam? Da 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 da. And there were people were so passionate one way or the other. He sucks. He's garbage. He's trash. He's never going to be good. He's got to go. Oh no, he's got potential. He's never had tools. He's never had the coaching. You got to keep him and let him see. Let's see if he can develop. Both valid points. And I wrote an article at the time saying, I understand why they made the trade. But that didn't mean the door was shut on Sam Darnold becoming a good quarterback. Now, of course, he's a very good quarterback. But Joe Douglas was in a position where, had he kept Darnold for another year and Darnold didn't show improvement, which, let's be honest, under that coaching staff, he probably wouldn't have. Even if he was a little bit better and they won a few more games, they wouldn't have gone to the playoffs. They wouldn't have been in position to grab a quarterback because you figure they win 6, 7, 8 games. And then his trade value tanks if that were to happen. So I always looked at it from Douglas's perspective of, I have this young quarterback with a very high ceiling. He's been a disappointment so far. I don't want to pick up his 50-year option because if he's a flop, that's $20 million down the drain. If he's a flop, he's got no trade value. However, right now, while people still have some hope for this kid, let me shop him and see what I can get. And he got a really good offer and he made a move. And let's not pretend Darnold was good the next year. It still took him a few more years to finally hit. And it took playing for a very highly, thought of offensive coach. So Darnold eventually developed. But at the time Douglas had him, it was like the potential was there. The production isn't. The clock is ticking because he's got 1 year left on his deal. And if he does play poorly, I don't have a quarterback and I don't have a trade chip. And if he plays a little better, I don't have a quarterback. I don't have the assets. I don't have a pick to get a quarterback, and I don't have a trade chip. So that's why I can't kill Douglas for moving him. And people can pretend, I knew Sam was going to be great. No one knew he was going to be great. I know, look, between analysts and fans, I know a lot of folks very knowledgeable about this game who were like, Darnold's done. Stick a fork in him. And I didn't push back because I was like, I can't argue with you saying that, but I was of the belief I want to see him with coaching, weapons, and protection because we'd never seen that. And now we're seeing it. So you can look at this exercise and say, oh, well, he had Darnold. Joe Douglas inherited Sam Darnold. He didn't inherit today's Sam Darnold. He inherited 2019 Sam Darnold, who was not very good. So taking a quick look, this is what Joe Douglas inherited when he got here. Again, we're talking about rebuild versus just, rework. Are you rebuilding your team or do you need to tweak it? You might have some major moves you have to make, but do you have to make 3 or 4 moves or do you have to make 10 or 11 or 12 moves? So imagine inheriting this roster. Sam Darnold before he was any good. Le'Veon Bell at the point that he was washed. Robbie Anderson, who I liked, good deep threat, solid receiver. I think most people agreed he was a number 2 or 3 receiver. I argued for a while that he was a 1 because he was the Jets 1. But, in all reality, I think he was a better route runner than most people gave him credit for. We saw that a little bit in Carolina. But Robbie Anderson, to me, was not an upper echelon receiver. Then you had Demaryius Thomas because Quincy Enunwa couldn't stay healthy. Thomas, late in his career, give you a few hundred yards. Jamison Crowder, nice player who couldn't stay on the field. So those are your targets right now before you get to the tight ends. And you might even forget one of these names or a couple of them, honestly. But you've got an unproven quarterback. You got a washed up running back. Your wide receiver 1 is really a 2 or a 3. You've got an aging veteran in Thomas, and you've got an injury prone Crowder. Sounds to me like you need to add out of those 5 guys. You need to replace 3 or 4 of them. Then you get to the tight ends. Whew. Ryan Griffin and Chris Herndon. Herndon, I can't believe he was a bust. I went to camp his rookie year. That dude was making one phenomenal catch after another. We saw him make a few in live action in games. I don't know if there was a work ethic issue with him. I don't know what the problem was, but the guy had talent. The guy had hands, and he just washed out. But so Ryan Griffin and Chris Herndon were your tight ends. There's 2 more guys Joe Douglas had to replace. Your offensive line, Kelvin Beachum, nice player. Always felt like he was underappreciated. Mid-tier tackle who I would go to war with if I'm a head coach or a GM. Your guard, Kalichi Osemele, injury prone as hell. Jonathan Harrison was your center. Career backup, had no business being a starter. That's why you went out and you got Ryan Khalil, who was probably worse. Brian Winters at the end of his career, playing on shredded tendons and ligaments, barely able to, to get on the field every week. And Brandon Shell, who's a sort of really a backup type, start you a few games here and there. Was never great, had a couple of solid seasons. So that's 11 starters. How many of those 11 would you say you would have to replace? If we're just being honest, let's say you keep Robbie, because Robbie's a great deep threat. Robbie could smoke anybody. Robbie smoked Richard Sherman. Robbie could do that, okay? Even though he wasn't a true number one, to be generous, let's say you keep Robbie. Darnold was like a 50-50. Could have gone either way. Let's say you kept him. Let's be as generous as possible here. Let's say you stuck with Darnold, you kept Robbie. You had to replace Le'Veon Bell. Demaryius Thomas was nothing to write home about. He was a quick Band-Aid with all the Quincy injuries. Crowder, again, injury prone, not a guy you can keep around long term. Griffin and Herndon, 2 more guys. That's 5. Beachum, fine, keep him. Osemele, terrible, 6. Harrison, 7. Winters, as I said, end of his career playing on spider webs for tendons, 8. Brandon Shell. I'll be super generous and say Brandon Shell wasn't. You didn't need to replace him. You needed to replace him. Was that 8 out of 11 guys that were, either injury prone or non-productive guys who were largely out of the league within a couple of years? How many of those guys were still in the NFL in, say, 2022, 23? Within 3 years, most of those guys were not in the NFL anymore, but they were the Jets starters. Then on defense, you had Leonard Williams. He was one of your trade chips. You could have kept him, absolutely. You had a young Quinnen Williams, who, if you think back, Ian Rappaport or Shefty, I forget which one because it's years ago now, was reporting that Joe Douglas was receiving offers for multiple premium picks for Quinnen Williams because teams loved him. And they were like, hey, new GM in New York. He didn't draft that kid. Let's call him, make an offer. He has no ties to him. Let's see if he'll give him up. Joe Douglas wouldn't give him up. Multiple ones, if I remember correctly. So while Joe Douglas didn't sign or didn't draft Quinnen Williams, I give him a lot of credit for not giving him away and for getting him extended. So it's not a Joe Douglas pick, but I thought, as the saying goes, sometimes the best move you make is the one you don't make. And not trading Quinnen Williams, I think, was a really good decision. Obviously, in the long term, it didn't work. It didn't matter because everyone else sucks. But just in terms of Quinnen Williams as a player, absolutely. Steve McClendon, probably my favorite underrated Jet of all time. Dude just showed up every week. Like I said, that was back when I was still living in the States. I could still go to training camp. You'd see McClendon out there getting in dudes' faces, demanding accountability, pulling the defense together when people were making mistakes. Like, that dude was a leader. I'll say keep him, even though he was probably later in his career by then. We'll say you keep him. Henry Anderson, Jag. Like, he had one solid season with the Jets, and he's another one, was probably out of the league in a few years. Your linebackers, your outside linebackers, Brandon Copeland and Jordan Jenkins. Now, I liked Jordan Jenkins. I think he was I do admittedly sometimes the high character players, like, I root so hard for them because I just like rooting for good people. And the impression I got with Jenkins was he was a really good guy. He had some production, but even I would admit I overrated him. He was an average player, but we'll be generous and say you didn't have to replace him, even though he's another one that was gone in a few years. Brandon Copeland had to be replaced. Avery Williamson, injury issues, had to be replaced. Corners, Tremaine Johnson. Look, they had no corners, so they brought him in. They paid him big money. But he was garbage, but again, they brought him in. So then you had Darryl Roberts, who had a good stretch. I forget which year. Maybe it was 18. He had a strong finish to the season, and you thought, all right, young guy, maybe he's coming around. He ended up being terrible. Brian Poole, another guy who had 1.5 good seasons, and then he went downhill. Then you had Marcus May, who had an up-and-down career with the Jets, and Jamal Adams, who shot his way out of town. So looking at that, you could have kept Leonard Williams. You kept Quinnen. McClendon was an older guy, but let's say you keep him. Henry Anderson had to go. Brandon Copeland had to go. Avery Williamson had to go. C.J. Mosley stay. We'll say Jordan Jenkins stays. Tremaine Johnson was a complete disaster. Darryl Roberts had to go. Poole had to go. Adams shot his way out of town, so he didn't have to go because of talent. He had to go because he was a pain. But what are we looking at here? Got about 14, 15 guys out of 22 that really were not even guys you could look at like Kelvin Beachum is a guy you can look at and say, not great, but solid vet who will do his job. You can live with him for a couple years. He's still in the league too. And congrats to him. Again, high character guys. I love rooting for high character guys. And that was Beachum. That's a rebuild, folks, to me. And I know there's 53 guys on the roster, but it starts with your starters. Like, that's who you're going to battle with. Who's playing 75, 85, 90% of your snaps? Those 22 guys. If you got to replace 15 of them, or 13 or 14, that's a rebuild. In my mind, as I said, this is all a matter of opinion. But that's my opinion. That's the random number I'm going to assign to it. If you're replacing more than half your starters because they're not good or they can't stay healthy, that's a rebuild. Looking at the current New York Jets, their starters. Justin Fields, we'll say you've got to replace because he's been bad. Anything's possible. Maybe he develops, blah, blah, blah. Nothing he's done to this point should lead us to believe he's going to get it. Okay, we're seeing missed guys. Wild Wave in the chat. How we doing, buddy? Real quick, let's address some of the chat. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Tony says, can you tell us what Spielman's doing besides getting paid? I talked about this a few weeks ago. We honestly don't know. I mean, he's advising. This is the thing. We're so angry because the team sucks that we just want heads to roll everywhere. But I say this all the time about assistant GMs, about people, such as Spielman, a personnel advisor. And the Jets are a little different because I don't know about you guys, but I'm not entirely convinced that, and I never have been, that Muji is making these moves. I think Aaron Glenn is the alpha. I think this is, every dynamic is different in the front office. I think this is a front office where Aaron Glenn is like, get me this. And Muji goes and gets it. I don't think Muji's overruling Aaron Glenn on anything. It's his job to get the players, but I think Aaron Glenn is the one pulling the string, so to speak. I could be wrong. I'm just throwing out a guess, and I've seen other people kind of make that same assumption. I don't think it's that far off base. So as far as Spielman goes, we don't know. We don't know, Tony. Honestly, as I said, the Jets took Armand Membu in the first round. Spielman said on his podcast prior to the draft, prior to being hired by the Jets, that he wouldn't take Membu he didn't say he wouldn't take him in the first round. I think he said he wouldn't take him in the top 15. However, in fairness to Spielman, he was going off of what was at that time Membu's listed height. And he's like, you got to have big he's like, there's no 6'2" starting tackles. And then he said there might be one or two. But generally speaking, if you're not like 6'4", towering, you're not a tackle, you're a guard. And Membu at the time, I think on Mizzou's website, was listed as like 6'2". Now he came in bigger than that at the combine. The Jets took him, fine. But all Spielman can do is advise. He might be in there saying, hey, listen, Darren Muji, if I were you, I would do what Glenn Naughton wants to do and draft Tedero McMillan so you have a second receiver for Justin Fields to throw to who's got the biggest wingspan on the planet and can make up for some of those errant wild throws, and then we'll get a tackle later on. Don't know. I don't know what Spielman's doing. I know he's advising, but at some point we got to just say it's Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji making the moves. They're not there to do what Spielman tells them. They're there. Spielman is there to advise, and they'll take his advice on board, and then they'll do what they're going to do. Now, look, if someone writes a book down the line and we find out Spielman was making the picks, then by all means, let's look at him. But when we're talking about advisors behind the scenes, I get that we're mad, but without knowing, how can you get upset one way or the other? Let's see. Trading Kochery was a downfall. Yeah, well, listen, that was hang on one second. Did they even play together? Did Darnold and Kochery? I feel like Darnold was traded during the Rex era. Or sorry, Kochery was traded during the Rex era. Because Kochery, again, another high character guy. I loved Kochery. But I think he was getting tired of the shenanigans in the wide receiver room. They were bringing in some low character guys. And Kochery was like, hey, this is a circus. These guys are clowns. I'm out. So, yeah. Let's see. Wild Wave says, as long as Woody stays out of it, I don't care. I don't know that he will. Tony says, will Jaime be replaced by a football president? Who knows? That's what a week for the Jets. Mark Sanchez is stabbing old men. We're getting stabbed by old men after beating them up in an alleyway. Team presidents facing charges for sexual whatever, emails, inappropriate work emails. And the Jets, I believe, are countersuing now and saying that it was a setup, which it may be. I don't know. I don't know who. Hope like hell the Jets didn't do anything wrong here. God knows they get laughed at for enough stuff. I hope the Jets, I hope the Jets can prove that it's not legit. And if it is legit, I want people to get fired. But that's just another disaster waiting to happen. Pardon me. Let's see. Actions speak louder than words, and Glenn's actions in the offseason approached it like a rebuild. I think they approached it, and this is something that was talked about the other day. And again, to me, Wild Wave, to me, rebuild is adding a lot more than what they added. I know they didn't have a ton of cap space, but signing a bunch of guys to 1-year stopgaps, it was almost like a pause button. And again, keep in mind, it's not like they went out and signed a bunch of starters. Like they signed depth pieces. Let's get to that now, though. Let's get to the Jets roster. So you had Justin Fields, okay? He was brought in, right? But you have to be fair to the Jets here and look at what the Jets' options were. They had no quarterback. Yes, they had Aaron Rodgers, but the money he was due, I forget what it was. It would have cost them something along the lines of $65 million, I believe, to keep him on the team this year and release him after the season. So it saved them tens of millions to let him go. If that was the reason, fine. I don't like that Rodgers said he was told it was because they didn't want a veteran voice in the room, that players might look to him for answers when Aaron Glenn is speaking. I would want Aaron Glenn to be a little more comfortable with that. But and again, I mean, we don't know that it's true, but Aaron Glenn never denied it. Not that he's obligated to, but to me, it didn't seem like a football decision, because it was weird to me. Aaron Glenn was asked, "What are you looking for in a quarterback?" And he didn't want to get specific. He just said, "A winner. I want a winner." Okay. So you let go of one of the winningest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL and replaced him with a first-round bust on his third team in 3 years with a losing record. I mean, that's why it was a silly answer. I get that he wanted to keep it silly, but I get that he wanted to keep it simple, but that was silly to say we want the number one thing I'm looking for in a quarterback is a winner, and I'm going to cut one of the winningest guys ever and replace him with a guy with a losing record. But anyway, from there, for the current Jets, running back, and we're going to treat this like, and we're not going to look. I'm not going to look right now and say, well, Braylon Allen's hurt. Well, we're talking about how this team was built going into the season. Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, both guys who could start on a lot of teams. Breece, light years ahead of what Le'Veon Bell was. Wide receiver 1, Garrett Wilson, a million years ahead of anything they had on the previous roster. Wide receiver 2, an abyss, nothing, garbage. Can't even say. I just left these blank. Like, I'm not even saying the guy that needs to be replaced. I'm looking at it like they don't even have a guy. So yeah, like wide receiver 2, you need somebody. Tight end, you drafted a guy, Mason Taylor, tight end 2. I know I said we're doing starters, but I'm looking at some spots like tight end where Ruckert isn't great, but he's having his most productive season as a pro. Low bar, I get it. But I would take Mason Taylor and Ruckert over Herndon and Griffin any day of the week. Offensive line. Olu at left tackle. Simpson at left guard. Josh Myers, give him some credit, even though he was meant to be a backup. I mean, do we say Tippmann there? We'll say Tippmann, Myers. You had AVT coming into the season, but Tippmann now, of course, playing right guard. Membu at right tackle. You do not have to replace any of those guys. You know what? We will say AVT because I said we're going to treat this in a way looking at the roster coming into the season. Coming into the season, it was Tippmann at center, AVT at right guard. That's 5 out of 5. You are replacing none of those players. So what do you need to do on offense? You probably need to replace Fields, but let's face it, the biggest thing about this year to me is evaluating him. It's the early results that have me thinking that may be a waste of time. But you're evaluating Fields, but let's put him on the needs to be replaced list so it doesn't look like we're trying to fudge the numbers and make it look better than what it is. You need a wide receiver 2. You need a wide receiver 3 as well, but we put, Taylor's your tight end, depending, they do run a lot of 2 tight end stuff. And then your offensive line is fine. So that's 3 out of your 11 starters. You desperately need to replace 3 guys. Again, you needed to replace 8 for the previous regime. Then on defense, Will McDonald. A bit of a disappointment this year. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the D-line lost a lot of oomph. Guys aren't getting rotated as much. They're not as fresh. Teams are running the ball at will because the Jets are not strong up front against the run. Quinnen Williams at one DT spot, Harrison Phillips at the other. Now, you went out and traded for Juwan Briggs, who's been a bit of a revelation. He's been a good player. But we'll go with the starters: McDonald, Quinnen, Phillips, Jermaine Johnson. Again, injury issues, but he's not a guy you need to replace right now. Outside linebacker, Quincy Williams. On the other side, well, depending on the alignment, there's so much nickel that using 2 outside linebackers is rare. But you got Marcelino McCrary-Ball, Jamie and Sherwood in the middle. If you want to say they got to replace McCrary-Ball, I'm not going to kill you for it, but I feel like we haven't seen enough of him yet to decide. He's had some good moments. He might be a solid starter, but again, to not make it look like I'm trying to make it look worse than what it is. Let's say he's the guy that you keep let's say he goes because he's played so little, he's proven so little. Put it this way, he's not a guy. He's not going to do anything this year that's going to make the Jets say we're not taking a high-level linebacker in the draft if they're available in the 2nd round, 3rd round. Then at corner, you got Sauce and Brandon Stevens. Brandon Stevens has played much better. Sauce Gardner, 2-time All-Pro. Yes, he's had his moments. He's had some BS flags. He's had some legit flags. Even if we say he's not the Sauce he was, he is still a good starter, like a well above average starter. That's why he doesn't get targeted a whole lot. As I've said before, if Sauce Gardner was as bad as everybody talks about him, he'd be getting targeted a dozen times a game. People act like that man cannot cover. He gets targeted 2-3 times a game. Then your safeties, Cisco and Adams, you can have them. It looks like I was wrong on Cisco. I thought he was going to have a breakout year. I was pounding the table that him and Quincy Williams were going to be the 2 breakout players on defense. Cisco has been invisible. Tony Adams has been more bad than good, a lot more bad than good. So what does that give us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You want to throw Harrison Phillips in there? I mean, you have Juwan Briggs behind him. So really, I'd say that spot is safe, secure, settled. So you need 6 guys. And you can say to me, oh, but this guy is only average and this guy isn't great. Say it's a Juwan Briggs. Yeah, I get that. Talk about this all the time. Super Bowl teams have okay players. Not everyone on the roster is a superstar. Nobody has that. It's okay to look at a team and say, that guy's a solid player. He can start for us. That's what a Juwan Briggs type player would be. You could argue that's what a Jamie and Sherwood type player would be. Even though he's had a down year, we're 5 games in. But he's not a liability. He's not a guy you look at and go, he's either not going to stay on the field, or he stinks, or he's going to be retired soon because he's getting old. He's not Henry Anderson, right? He's not an Avery Williamson. He's not a Brandon Copeland. So you're looking at a roster in terms of just starters. If you were to replace 5 guys, 6 guys, you're a contender. I mean, look, this team right now, they are where they are largely because of penalties and coughing up the football. Not because they're 3rd in the NFL in rushing. 3rd in the NFL in rushing. 19th, I believe, in offense, if I'm not mistaken. They can move the football. They can do some things well. It's the fact that the head coach and his staff have this defense playing worse than they did at any point last year, that there's no hope. If this defense was anywhere near as good as it had been either early last year or the previous year, they'd have a couple of wins right now. They'd be in good shape. And you'd feel good about this. You'd be like, all right, we're playing good defense. The run game is solid. Justin Fields, there's some questions, but we're doing enough on offense to put up some points. You'd feel good about it. But you don't feel good about it because the defense is playing like garbage. But if you're going to tell me that a defense, and again, I know Jermaine Johnson has missed some games, but if you're going to tell me a front seven of Quinnen, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, and then Phillips and Briggs in the middle, with a healthy Quincy Williams once he comes back, that they shouldn't be able to shut down the run and, well, at least be better against the run. To me, guys, and again, I'm not saying who's right or wrong, but in my mind, this is not a rebuild. This is like, hey, we got like 5 spots we need to fix. Rebuild to me is like half our starters have to go. And this team is not that. They're not real. I mean, it's not even close. And like I said, I feel like I was being a little, like I look at a guy like Cisco, and yeah, maybe I'm saying this a little because I whiffed on saying he would break out. He's a guy, I think this is a big year for him. I think there are still 11 games left. You could see some guys play better as the season goes on. Listen, and it's not just me. We've heard the commentators say it who are calling the games and saying this Jets defense is boring, predictable, same thing. Quarterbacks know what's coming. You think that's helping? Anybody? Not just Cisco. You think anybody's benefiting from that on this defense? So to me, discipline, penalties, that's on the players. Coaching, turnovers. I'm not saying they're a Super Bowl team. I'm just saying what I've been saying for quite some, going back to last year when people were trashing this team. I kept saying, I don't think folks agree with me. Some do, of course. But I think there's a lot of people who don't agree with me on the importance of good coaching. They haven't had it for a very long time. And they don't have it now. Special teams. We've talked about that. Why did you keep Xavier Gibson? That cost you a game. Why do you have a 240-pound back returning kicks? That cost you a fumble in a huge spot and a player. Isaiah Williams, who they brought back to the practice squad, good for him. I hope he figures it out and becomes a solid player. He fumbles one away. So you have guys back there who are inexperienced. I mean, what's most frustrating about the Isaiah Williams fumble and the Xavier Gibson fumble, those guys had an extensive history of fumbling on returns. And I'm assuming those are guys Chris Banjo wanted. Generally speaking, you listen to interviews and you read books, GMs and ex-coaches, and I've heard a lot about, and read a lot that they say, look, when it comes to who's your return man, who's your kicker, the special teams coach has the biggest voice in the room for that. That's his unit. Who do you want back there? And if that's the case, if Chris Banjo is the one who said, keep Xavier Gibson, and if Chris Banjo is the one who said, let's put Braylon Allen back there, those are some questionable calls. But again, rookie coach. Never been the head of a unit before. So I think, what needs to happen here is that the Jets, what the Jets need to do, I mean, this quarterback situation is so daunting. Every time I look at the quarterback spot on the depth chart. What they need to do is just keep evaluating. I say let Justin Fields throw the ball in these games where, especially now at 0-5, these games that they're getting out of hand and you're still running it, stop. Just let him throw the ball. Let's see what he can do. There's no point in being down multiple scores late in the game and running the football. Just let Justin Fields throw it. And maybe the light will come on. Maybe he'll get to a point. Maybe one day, one game, it'll click. And he'll be like, okay, now I've had enough reps. Now I've seen enough coverages. Now I have a better idea what's coming, so now I can react quicker. And maybe he improves and gets closer to hitting his potential because he's not come anywhere near that. But to me, folks, rebuild versus whatever else you want to call it, retool, evaluation, Wild Wave, I believe said in the chat. Yeah, sure. But rebuild, man, you're third in the NFL in rushing. You're better than 28 other teams, 29 other teams. That's not a rebuild. And that's one of the most important aspects of the game. It's not like I'm sitting here picking out some random obscure stat where they happen to be performing well and saying, oh, look, they're good at this thing. No, they're good at running the ball down your throat. Better than almost every team in the NFL. You're doing that. In my mind, you're not rebuilding. You should be competing. And that's why if they clean up the penalties, listen, I am not here to be optimistic and talk about any runs or they're going to win game. No. I think the defense is bad enough that it's just going to be like this for most of the year. But if they clean up the penalties and keep running the ball the way they are, they won't have to ask much out of Justin Fields. If they clean up the penalties and tackle a little, that's just fundamental stuff. Fix the basic fundamental things, and they'll win some games. And you can say, all right, we're on the right track. But until they're doing any of that, they're not. And because people look at the record, 0-5, that's a rebuild. And dude, if you're keeping like 17 or 16 of your starters, that ain't a rebuild. Again, that's just me. Yes, we can talk about the backups. And yes, I know backups are important, but I just wanted to focus mainly on the guys who are playing the majority of your snaps. That to me is what determines if a team is rebuilding. When you're at the point where your depth is the issue, that's like just continuing to retool, continuing to not rebuild but build. The rebuild is, to me, you're tearing it all down because you don't have enough talent and you have a ton of guys you need to bring in. I don't see that being the case here. Real quick in the chat, Bang Mateo says we hired the wrong head coach. Well, time will tell, Bang. I'm not giving up on Aaron Glenn this quickly, but I am not, nor am I going to sit here and paint a pretty picture. It has been ugly. It's been, not only has it been ugly, it's getting worse every week. Scary stuff. Rich says another good DB desperately needs safeties. Yeah. Listen, that's one of the most surprising things because you look at the history Aaron Glenn had in Detroit and New Orleans developing young safeties. And I thought, oh, great. Like, I wrote an article. Who's it going to be? Who's the safety that Aaron Glenn's going to develop? Who's going to have a 5-interception season? And I thought it was going to be Andre Sisco. Oops. They might not even have 5 interceptions as a team by the time the season is over. Wild Wave says Quinn and Quincy safeties edge. I don't know what you mean by that, Wild Wave. Trade them? What? They're not going anywhere. Well, I say that. I don't know why I said that. I've been talking for a couple weeks now that Quinnen could go. Quincy, I said during the offseason, Quincy could be a trade chip. Quinnen wouldn't shock me. Rich says DT. I'm not going to get into that anymore. That's a bit of a sore spot for me, Rich, with them not taking any DTs. Although, again, Jawan Briggs has been nice, so they did find a little something there. Tony says terrible coaching, no wins. Absolutely. Tony also says the Jets should start Brady Cook. I'm a Brady Cook guy, but I'm not there yet, only because it would be such a monument, like a massive. I just can't see it happening. I can't see them giving up on. I hope Cook starts a few games at some point. But I can't see that happening, barring like multiple injuries, and I don't want anyone getting injured. Let's see. Tony says Rex never had a chance with Tannenbaum. Rex, I don't think Rex is person. I think Rex had a lot of pull, and they had a lot of bad drafts with. And I loved Rex. Don't get me wrong. And Wild Wave says, yeah, trade them. So the players he was mentioning, yeah, there could be some deals. So we'll see what happens if they lose to Denver on Sunday. Let's see. Muji entertained Quinnen, according to Jerry Jones. He did. I mean, look, when Micah Parsons' name is in the trade talk, you listen. And that's a team that I've mentioned, that others have mentioned. Like if Dallas came knocking for Quinnen once, and they've got multiple first-round picks, they win a couple games, and they feel like they're in the playoff hunt, I could absolutely see that happening. Wild Wave said Rex didn't know talent. Yeah, Rex, Rex He signed off on the Mo Wilk. It was, I don't think Rex considered character enough. You know, they drafted Mo Wilkerson, who had a nice couple of years, but once he got paid, he went off the rails. And, you know, I remember Rex, when they called him after the draft, you know, saying, "You're going to play hard for us every down," right? Like something like that. Basically acknowledging on film, you don't always play hard, but you better do that here. And we just used a first round pick on you. That's bad. To me, you're off my board, especially in the first round. I feel like round one guys, you got to be quick with that trigger to pull them off your board. You see a guy who doesn't go all out, can't take him. You can't do it. Let's see. Rex grabbed Mangini's roster and ran with it and later destroyed it. Wild Wave, we have our first ever major disagreement, my friend. And I was going to talk about Rex tonight, actually. I'm not here saying that Rex Ryan should have been the hire this offseason. I think he's been out of the game long enough. Tony Pauline, who, I mean, let's be honest here. Tony Pauline, like, he's right once a decade, maybe. And he's saying Rex could get the Miami job if McDaniel is fired. I would be shocked. Absolutely shocked. But Rex Ryan, if not for Rex Ryan, Jets fans, for those of you who were old enough to remember the Rex Ryan years, say what you will. But how much joy would this team have brought us in the last 20 years if not for Rex Ryan's, the Rex Ryan years? When they weren't just playoff teams, look, the only two times in my life as a fan, 37, 38 years, however many years now, Parcells and Rex, they each had 1 year where, like, I didn't have a doubt they were going to win on Sunday. And no, they didn't go undefeated. But I would wake up, I'd like, oh, today's another win, no problem. They're going to dominate. Like, it felt good. I've had 2 years, in 38 years, I've had 2 seasons where I felt confident on a Sunday. Rex Ryan, like him or not, gave us, for anyone who wasn't alive during Super Bowl III, for anyone who didn't witness Super Bowl III, for any Jets fan that didn't witness Super Bowl III, as pathetic as it is to say, it's true that Rex Ryan gave us our Super Bowl. That was the biggest win any of us have ever seen as Jets fans. Beating Brady and Belichick at their height in their building in the playoffs. I would much rather it be an actual Super Bowl. But for all the hate Rex gets and all the celebrating when Rex got fired, he did a lot of things for this team that no coach has ever done. And I always see the Mangini argument. And the thing is, yes, Mangini did put a lot of that roster together, but people forget that was the number one defense in the NFL. Unless I'm mistaken, I'd have to go back and look. I'm sure they were number one in the NFL. And how was that defense run? The first thing Rex Ryan did when the offseason started, he was waiting at Bart Scott's front door to offer him the world. And he offered Jim Leonard a ton of money. And he said, you guys are coming with me from Baltimore to implement my defense. Jim Leonard, you're going to take Kerry Rhodes' job in the secondary. Bart Scott, you're going to start middle linebacker. And you guys know my defense, and you're going to make the calls on game day. And those two guys who knew Rex's defense, who Rex brought with him, led them to the number one defense in the NFL. That wasn't Eric Mangini. And you talk about smoke and mirrors. Those teams, number one in the NFL without a pass rusher. You had one corner, Darrelle Revis. And I hear that too. Oh, he had Revis. Guys, teams can deploy 5 pass catchers. Fantastic. Having Revis was great. I'm not saying it wasn't. You still got to account for 4 other guys. Who were his corners year one with Revis? Lito Shepard. Strickland. I mean, these were guys who, again, speaking of guys who were out of the NFL in a year or two. So that was, I feel like Rex was a guy who brought this team as close as, probably as close as they'll ever get to a Super Bowl. We got to watch Tom Brady sit and pout on the turf in Foxborough with his head bowing after losing to the Jets. And I get it, man. It's pathetic that that's our Super Bowl, but it is. What else are you going to say? What win was bigger than that? I mean, yeah, Parcells went to the AFC Championship game. They didn't have to beat a Belichick Brady team on the road. That was fun. And I mean, you beat Manning on the road. You beat Brady on the road. You beat I almost said, Carson Palmer on the road. It was Carson Palmer. I'm thinking him and Andy Dalton. Beat him on the road. You beat the Chargers on the road with Mark Sanchez, who, by the way, do we even talk about that? Do we bring up the Mark Sanchez thing? Wild Wave, Glenn, how many draft picks did Rex draft? Look, as I've said, I won't defend Rex's draft record, but I don't feel like Rex was. I feel like Tannenbaum was established enough. He should have been the one making the picks. If like at this point in time, Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji, they're both rookies, and Aaron Glenn's an alpha, and he's done scouting. He knows that world. I would expect he's the one that has the most influence with who they take. Rex and Tannenbaum. Rex was a rookie coach who was a coach and not a talent evaluator. That was on Tannenbaum if he was putting his hands up and let Rex take whoever he wanted. That you got to know. You got to know what guys can do and what they can't. You know, let's blame ownership. Maybe Woody should have said, Rex, you know, we let Mangini make the picks, and they made some great picks with Mangini. Not so much with Rex. So I'm not defending the personnel decisions during Rex's time, but a GM's got to be able to say, hey, look, happy for your contributions, but we're not taking guys with questionable work ethic. Quentin Cobal's another one. Like taking DNs in the first round with questionable work ethic. And what happened? Turns out they didn't have good work ethic. So, yeah, Rex was questionable in terms of talent evaluation, but in terms of X's and O's and beating teams on Sundays, there's not been a guy better at it in my time as a Jets fan. And someone asked this the other day on the forums at Jet Nation. Most active Jets message board on the web. Sign in, register, talk about the Jets. And also, before I forget, Flight 29, new podcast for Jet Nation. Check it out. Go to Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff, and subscribe to that. First couple of episodes have been absolutely fantastic. Let me see real quick. Yeah, they've done 2 episodes. Bilal Powell joined by Rami Lavi of WFAN. So you got a former Jets running back, WFAN personality, and they've been doing some great stuff. New to the team, welcome to them. Welcome aboard. Where was I now? Where was I? Was it Rex? Was I still talking about Rex? Mangini? Whoever it was. Whatever. I wanted to plug the show, forgot to plug it, and plugged it, forgot. Forgot where I was going. I'll tell you where I'm going. I'm going to London on Sunday for the Jets and Broncos. What will likely be another New York Jets loss. Let's see real quick. Guys that worry me a little bit in this game. J.K. Dobbins is their starting running back, but man, R.J. Harvey, the rookie out of UCF, man, I hope they don't get that guy in the field. I would probably take him over Dobbins. That's just me, though. That's just me. Real quick, Tony, Cromartie and Revis, deadly combo. They were. But before the Cromartie deal, it was Revis and Strickland and Lito Shepherd and just guys who weren't very good. Granted, that was only 1 year. Tanny was the accountant. Well, he was, but he was in that accountant's chair long enough that he, at some point, like, you're the GM now. You know, you worked under Parcells. How many years of having the title GM before you're actually making GM decisions? Mangini was the evaluator. Well, Mangini had good drafts for the Jets. There's no denying that. But he didn't do a whole lot when he left. Same as Rex. Rex had a lot of success here. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Someone said on the wonderful forums on Jet Nation the other day, how did we get here? Does anyone even remember how we got here, as in to being the worst team in the NFL again? I feel like it started when you hired John Idzik. You can't draft 20 dudes in 2 years and find like one player. You just can't. It was like going with a 33-man roster once you hired Idzik by year 2. And okay, let's give credit where it's due. so we're not being too biased here. Sheldon Richardson was good for a couple years, but he was a head case. D. Milner couldn't stay on the field, was terrible early, had and fans forget this. If you go back to his last couple of starts, he played really well. Like really well. And it looked like, oh, this guy might be coming on now. Like he got beat up a lot, he got hurt a lot, he played poorly. And then all of a sudden he had a couple of games where it was like, oh, this looks like a different guy. And there was injury. So I can't kill Idzik for that. I always say you can't kill GMs for injury. Well, Milner, I think, had some injury history. But I always say if a GM drafts a dude with no injury history and he gets hurt, I ain't killing him for it. Like, we got to be sane here, people. Perfect example is Cam Clark, who the Jets drafted and I thought was good enough to be a starter one day, and people were projecting him to be a starter one day. That dude set the school record in college for consecutive games played. Played like 40-some games in a row without an injury. Comes to the Jets and breaks his neck. And fans are like, oh, I drafted another injury guy. Dude, be sane. Just be a little bit sane. A little. It's hard enough for anyone to get it right in the draft. If we're going to start criticizing GMs for drafting a dude who has never, ever been hurt in his entire life and then gets hurt, then what the hell are we doing? Anyway, real quick, back in the chat, Mangini was good. I'm surprised he's not coaching. I think he rubbed people the wrong way. I think he was kind of abrasive. I think he wasn't very well liked by owners. Mike Saunders. Mike, you are not the first person I've heard say this. Mike says he thinks Mangini should have been made GM at some point. I've heard that quite a bit. I wouldn't hate it, to be honest. Even though he had a lot of misses in Cleveland, I would not hate that. If the Jets hired McCarthy, if the Jets had hired McCarthy, is Sam Darnold still a Jet? Good chance. I think there's a good chance of that. Tony says Mangini for Jets president. We know what it'll be like listening to Belichick at a news conference. I don't see Mangini ever working for Woody again. Woody apparently, supposedly, reportedly, the year he fired Mangini, promised him at the beginning of the year, no matter what happens, I'm not firing you. And then he fired him. So I don't know if that would ever happen. Let's see. Mangini showed Woody no respect. I love him for that. Yeah, well, that's the thing with Mangini. Like, I didn't dislike the guy, but he worked for Belichick, and you got the feeling he walked around believing that made him Belichick. Like he did. He acted like he was a dude who'd won multiple rings, and like, I'm going to be confrontational and disrespectful. Maybe not disrespectful, but he didn't. You could tell he didn't have a lot of respect for people the way he talked to them. Not quite as bad as Chip Kelly. I think Mangini. Yeah, Chip Kelly was bad. I lived near Philly when Chip Kelly was there, and players didn't like him. Building didn't like. Nobody liked him, and he was bad. Like, when you're losing and you're treating people poorly, gotta go. You got to win if you want to act like that. Mangini didn't. Chip Kelly didn't. So yeah, if you want to treat people that way, you gotta be a better person. You got to win more games if you're not going to be a better person, I should say. So for the game this week, like I said, J.K. Dobbins, expect a big day from him because the Jets have been having a really hard time with the run. I think on defense, our good friend John Franklin Myers, the most disrespected Jet in recent memory. That dude was so important to what they did on defense when they were good on defense. And for whatever reason, there were always fans who would just put him down. And they talked about that guy like he was garbage. And it's a weird thing, isn't it? The number of times I've heard Jets fans get mad when you cite pressures as an important stat. Like, hey, JFM, you could pencil him in for 40 pressures every year. Pressures don't matter. Pressures aren't. Sacks matter. Pressures aren't. And then let the Jets tackle give up 5 pressures in a game. That dude's a turnstile. He's getting the quarterback pressured all day. He sucks. We got to replace him. Wait a minute. Didn't you just say pressures don't matter? When I told you John Franklin Myers gets 40, 50 of them every year? But now that the tackle gave some up, we got to get rid of the tackle? Which one is it? Do they matter or do they not matter? Spoiler alert, they matter. They matter less nowadays because guys are so good at so many quarterbacks and runners that can make plays on the move that it may not impact the way it used to. But it's still, if you can get the quarterback off his spot, mess up the timing of the play, you give the defense a chance to get a stop. That's what John Franklin Myers does. You can guarantee he's getting at least one sack this week. At least one, because Jets. That's just, watch out whoever they have him matched up on. He's one to keep an eye on. Nick Bonito, he's a guy, really, really causes a lot of problems in the backfield. Monster pass rusher. Pat Surtain is going to be, I would imagine, I don't know if they're going to have him follow Garrett all day. They wouldn't really have to. And Riley Moss on the other side is a pretty good player in his own right. He's not Surtain, so let's not pretend he is. But I think Denver's going to be able to run the ball. I think both teams are going to be able to run the ball. But I'm not so sure Justin Fields. We've seen the numbers now. I pointed it out after the game, and a bunch of it's a weird thing. It's like everybody sort of realized it at once. While I was watching the game, I thought to myself, how many touchdown passes has Justin Fields thrown this year that gave them a lead? Because by the time he threw his second one last week, you're like, he's always throwing these touchdowns when they're down by 20. And so I went and looked it up, and then I saw a bunch of other people did too. So he threw the touchdown against Pittsburgh week 1 to give him the 9-7 lead. Every touchdown pass since then, they've been down by at least 2 touchdowns. So Justin Fields comes up small when the game is close. Once the game is a blowout, maybe the defense is pulling back a little bit, foot off the gas. Then he pads his stats a little, and I got to listen to people say, Justin Fields isn't the problem. Look, he's got 5 touchdowns and no interceptions and completion percentage. Yeah, what's his ADOT? Look, average depth of target is 7 inches. Snap the throw, 3.5 minutes. I mean, there's some issues here. He's taking sacks he doesn't need to take. You play Dallas, they had I think they had 5 sacks all year, and then they had 5 in that game. So really just ridiculous. Let's see. Rich says, totally matter. Q needs to help to get off. JFM did that. Yeah, JFM made Quinnen better. For sure. He made that whole defense better. Why would they get rid of Breece Hall with Allen out? It doesn't make sense. Are you asking hypothetically, or was there a trade while we've been talking here? I'll assume you're saying because there have been rumors. Well, Andre, I would say it's because the season's over. You're not going to the playoffs anyway. You might get a comp pick, but if you go on a spending spree, you won't. So you would lose Breece Hall for nothing. So you would be keeping Breece Hall in the building now, knowing you're not going to the playoffs, knowing he's going to leave via free agency, and knowing you're not going to get anything in return. If your season is over anyway and you need assets, why not deal him? Who cares if you go with backup running back? I mean, really, this offensive line is good enough. You'll still move the ball a little bit. You're not going to win games with or without him. So, I mean, to me, that's why you would get rid of him. I think he's miserable. I think he wants to win football games. He realizes that's not going to happen here. So he's going to have to leave if he wants to win. So I think Breece Hall through free agency is as good as gone. And they're going to get nothing in return for him. So I would trade him now. Absolutely. I like the player, but if he's going to go anyway, get something while you can. Let's see real quick. Mike Saunders says, I always question why NFL teams, especially the Jets, do not make any abstract decisions about a player personnel. Then the video of the Giants GM came out. GMs can be just incompetent. They can. They're not, people say, oh, you shouldn't question that GM. He's a professional. And look, I say all the time, like, GMs, they all know more than me, and I don't play this game where I'm like, I'm really smarter than they are. But look, I can disagree. I can look at a decision and say, wow, in my opinion, that doesn't make sense. And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong, just like they are. I would hope they'd be right more often. I'll tell you what, you look at some of our mock drafts at JetNation, I would imagine some of them would have been better than what we got from Idzik and McCagnon. Let's see. Andre says that's because the game is over when he's putting up the stats. I'm assuming you mean Justin Fields. Tony says trade Breece and his fumbles before he gets hurt. I think he's only got 1 fumble. I could be wrong about that. And, Bart Scott made a point. That's you look at the two big fumbles they've had in recent weeks. Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. And I don't want to make excuses for them. And look, these aren't excuses. They're reasons. Every now and then in the NFL, you see a defender make the peanut punch. Like every now and then, a dude makes a perfect play. The way either putting his helmet on the ball or reaching in there and punching and getting his fist into the tiny gap between the bicep and the ball and popping it out. And it happens. And that's what happened on Brees's fumble. And the Braylon fumble, that doesn't get enough credit. I forget who forced it. That was an incredible play. That was like two dudes diving, Braylon Allen diving for the end zone. Defender came, I believe, from his right, and while he's diving, takes a swing and just perfect. Just landed, just landed a square fist on the biggest part of the ball and punched it out. And it's like, all right, frustrating, but it's just a damn good play by the defense. Sometimes that happens. These aren't sloppy, carrying the ball, reckless, not paying attention. Defenders just made plays. Rich says, Hall, Wilson, Taylor, good pieces to build around. Why not keep Hall? Because, Rich, you can't. I don't think he has. Look, Brees Hall shot up a flare the other day after the game and made it clear he wants to be traded. No, he didn't say trade me now, but he said, my time to show what I can do in this league is running out. What he means is, I'm a running back. We have a very short shelf life. And I'm now at the end of my first contract, and I don't get to show what I can do. He wants to go. There's nothing, the Jets are not tagging him. So he is leaving after the season to go play for a winner. I would imagine he's going to have his agent call the Chiefs the second free agency starts or a few days before to say, are you interested in my guy? You guys aren't stacked at running back. He would be the best one you have. Do you want Brees? So that's why. I think he wants, he does want out. I can't blame him. He's at the end of his contract, so he can get out. So if you're going to lose him anyway, you're not going to convince him to stay. I don't want to, relitigate this, but I'm shocked that Garrett Wilson resigned here. I'm glad that he did, but I think they must have had a hell of a sales pitch to convince him they were going to be competitive. Because I know he's saying the right things, but that dude's got to be going home at night like, I can't believe this. Like, I went from Ohio State to football hell, never had a winning season, might not win a game this year. And, for the first few years of my new contract, we're not going to be good. So, like I said, I'm glad he signed it, but I'm surprised he signed it. Let's see. This defense let Miami go up the field on them 96 yards and score. Then following week, they let the Cowboys go up the field 93 yards. I'm going to finish what you're saying here, Andre, and then I'm going to comment. There's something specific I talked about earlier on a different show. The Cowboys went 93 years. If I'm not mistaken, this defense needs more work than the offense does because the offense does move the ball. Absolutely. The offense is not that bad. Field isn't great, but like I said, you're third in the NFL in rushing. This team, not only did the Cowboys go 93 yards, or was it 91? Whatever they went, they did it with three backup linemen, and they had one healthy starter on that O-line. And it took them 1 minute and 21 seconds to steamroll the Jets defense over 90 yards for a touchdown. That's embarrassing. Those are the types of moments where me and any Jets fan in the world, we can defend Aaron Glenn all we want. You have moments where the backup offensive line of a bad team is steamrolling you in your own building when you're desperate for a win. Those are the things. Indefensible. You can't, there is nothing you can say where you go, okay, yeah, I get why that's allowed to happen. No. You got Quinnen, you got Briggs, who, like I said, has been solid. You got enough that another team's backups shouldn't be able to kick your ass up and down the field. And that's what happened, and that's embarrassing. Chak says that was a good play by the defender on Hall's. Exactly. The Hall fumble and the Braylon Allen fumble. I'm not killing them for it. Sometimes the defense makes a play. On both those plays, they made a play. We know the Jets never force one. But if the Jets on Sunday, if Andre Cisco or anybody, if a defender comes up behind a running back and squeezes their fist in there and pops it out, you're going to say, oh, it's a great play. What a play. You're not going to go, oh, man, why is that running back being so sloppy with the ball? No. They made plays. Now, look, the Isaiah Williams, the Braylon Allen. The Braylon Allen one, for some reason, I can't picture it in my head. I'm seeing more of the knee than the fumble, but those weren't amazing plays. Those were they just fumbled. Let's see. Yep, Tony's right. We still need a turnover. Only team without one. Kind of ridiculous. Dan Garrett's a very high character dude. I have no doubt. That's one of the reasons. I'm one of the many reasons I'm very happy that Garrett Wilson stayed. I'm just surprised. I really am. I thought he was going to say, "Look, I come from Ohio State. I'm used to winning football games, and we don't do that here. So I'm going to go." But I'm glad he did. I'm glad he stayed. By the time the Jets are competing, Quinn will be in his 30s. That's what I've been saying last couple of weeks, Wild Wave. I don't know if you caught when I said it, but people have said to me, oh, stop being stupid. Why would they trade Quinnen? Because they're not good. It is highly unlikely they will be any good next year. They might, but probably won't. They might be good in 2 years. That is when Quinnen Williams is 30 and his contract is expiring. So do you want Quinnen Williams for 2 more meaningless years and then try to trade him when his value goes down and he's probably bursting at the seams to leave in free agency? Or do you deal him now and get some picks? I would deal him now. And it's not, I mean, I'm tired of saying it. It's not that I dislike, I love Quinnen Williams. Love him. But you can't keep players around for sentimentality. I want him to be here for the next couple of 4-13 seasons. No, that's a waste. Waste of an asset. Do the guy a favor, let him go win some football games somewhere. Let's see. Mike says, call up Brandon Smith, move Stevens to safety. Well, look, Stevens has been better of late, but the safeties have been terrible. So Stevens there and someone else try the boundary might not be a bad idea. Brandon Smith, I would prefer one of the young guys. I can't remember if it was you, Mike. Somebody last week was banging the drum for Brandon Smith, but he's 26, 27 years old. Bring up a young guy who has a chance to, be with you for the next 10 years if they develop. Trade for Tanner McKee, sign Linderbaum and Alec Pierce, draft Mendoza. Well, that's a lot of moves. We'll see what happens. I like some of it. See if Eccles wants to play free safety. Yeah, that was stupid letting Eccles go. He's got an interception this year, by the way. Looked that up a day or two ago. I was like, let's see. I bet Brandon Eccles has an interception. He does. Nobody on the Jets does. Nobody. Andre says, exactly, it's insane the defense let that happen. I don't even think the Giants defense would let that happen, and I hate the Giants. As I've gotten older and probably being out of New York, I don't really hate the Giants anymore. They're just kind of there. I have friends who are Giants fans. I don't care if they win or lose. I'm just tired of the Jets being terrible. It's probably easier, though, because when I lived in New York as a kid, when the Giants were, even when the Jets were decent, the Giants were better. And it's when you have to be around it and hear them talk, that's where the resentment comes in. When you're thousands of miles away and there's no Giants fans, you don't care. Cook needs to start at least 3 games. That's kind of the number in my head. I think I said earlier, Mike, I hope he starts a few. Let him get 3 starts at some point. Let's see. I think that's why he stayed. Maybe loyal to a fault. We'll see. Let's see how this goes, Dan. And I don't mean this as a knock on Garrett. Let's see if a couple more years of 4 or 5 wins, and especially if Fields goes, if Garrett's agent doesn't call the Jets and go, hey, get my guy out of here. He wants to go win some football games. I'm not hoping he does. I'm not predicting he does. I just think look, I was wrong. I said I thought he might demand a trade before he signed an extension. I was wrong. But, man, he's just so competitive. It'd be hard to believe if there's loyalty, and then there's let me go win a football game somewhere. Let's see. We'll wrap this up here in a couple minutes. My info. How we doing, my info? He says, if you were the Jets, would you try to get the number 1 pick, then trade Hall for picks? Yeah, I would trade Brees for, maybe you get like a 4 and a 5 or a 3 and a 5 or something like that. If you get the number 1 pick, you got to take a quarterback, but it's not a great Not a great crop. It's a lot of 1-year wonders, which is a little bit scary. And I gotta watch. I've only watched Mateer once. I gotta watch him a little bit more. Um, that's actually what I'm doing as soon as I get off the air. It's back to prospects. Trade Butterfinger Lazard to the Steelers. I mean, listen, we've all been saying that since the offseason. I still think there's a chance it happens. Just a matter of when and what you. I think you get a 7. It'll be another pick swap. Jets will send Lazard and a 7 for a 6 from Pittsburgh or something like that. Quentin Skinner time, says Tony. I'd be thrilled with that. Get me a 6'5" dude with sticky, gluey hands who catches everything that comes his way. And my info, we'll close it out with this one, says, I think the coach will be gone next year. Remains to be seen. I think the Jets will want to do everything humanly possible to not part ways with Aaron Glenn. Here's what I think happens. If the team does not improve and a good coach, a good proven coach like the way they screwed up by not going after Vrabel last offseason, I think they won't repeat that mistake. And someone put in the chat, or no, it was actually on Flight 29. Like I said, check it out. Some good stuff on there. Rami was saying, and he wasn't predicting this, but just giving an example. You look at how badly things are going in Baltimore. Like, what if they just keep losing? And they say, you know what, Harbaugh, you've had a nice run here, but we're going to go in another direction. Like something like that, then you have to pounce if you're the Jets and let Aaron Glenn go. But if the team doesn't improve and there's not a clear upgrade somewhere, you got to stick with them. You got to stick with them. Firing them after 1 year, I think, would be a little bit too much. Thank you, everyone, for hopping in, watching, listening along, hopping in the chat. Nice discussion. Good stuff. Rebuild versus retool, restock, whatever you call it. Not a rebuild to me. You may feel differently. That's fine. It's, like I said, no hard, fast rule definition of what it is. But I think that this team is not 13 or 14 starters away from being competitive. I think they're on the verge, 3-4 players in big spots, of course, QB, and they would be a competitive football team looking at fighting for a playoff spot. They're just not there now. It ain't going to happen this year, probably not next. That's it for this one, Jets fans. Have a good one. Flight 29, Jet Nation podcast. Be sure to subscribe to that too. Subscribe to us if you haven't done already. Have a good one, Jets fans.